Welcome to our intermediate introduction to hosted exchange. This is most likely the future for large and small governments, as well as large and small companies, all the way from enterprise down to the smallest business. So let's get started. Hosted exchange, the basic premise is that you're running mail on hosted cloud servers rather than your on-premise servers. So that's basically servers that are stored out in the web. It's been pretty popular with small business since about 2007. It's been mainstream for mid-sized companies since about 2011, and now it's getting to be the big boys. So you can see here, this is just a very small number of the millions of companies that are now using the product. Product mix for most companies will include hosted exchange, which is again just shutting down your own mail servers, moving that mail server infrastructure out to the internet, which is much easier than it sounds, by the way. That comes with Exchange Online Protection, which is just your antivirus and anti-spam that you can manage through web interface, and it comes with it with most of the providers. I looked primarily at Office 365 for Microsoft and Rackspace. Let's move on. Archiving in EDISCOVERY is a big issue for most governments, and people get FOIP'd in Canada. And also for any enterprise, any public company is going to be required to have this type of a system. What this lets you do is keep all mail forever, and have your legal department or IT or whoever else is delegated to scan through it very quickly and pull out, do searches, I should say, not scan, do searches through the mail and find email that's relevant for whatever discovery is being asked for. Another popular tie-in is LYNC Online, and LYNC Online now also ties into Skype. So if you're familiar with Skype, you get the idea. Most companies are going to want an Active Directory integration, which just means that instead of having your users have a separate username and password, this will allow them to use their current username and password to get into their mail and have it all synced, so they don't have separate accounts. It's nice and clean and simple. It's a bit complex to set up, but it can be done without being the end of the earth. Let's take a look at a short video.
Where is the Microsoft Cloud? In reality, it exists in our vast worldwide network of data centers that provide the foundation for a wide array of online services. Microsoft's cloud is comprised of a globally distributed data center infrastructure supporting over 200 online services. More than 1 billion customers and 20 million businesses in over 70 countries use these services each year. Today we're going to take you on a tour of a few of our data centers and show you how Microsoft's Global Foundation Services team, the team that designs, builds, operates, and secures our cloud infrastructure, is delivering high availability and reliability, high efficiency, smart scalability, a secure, private, trusted cloud, and sustainability in all our facilities worldwide. Microsoft has been operating data centers since 1989, and this is an area where Microsoft continues to make significant strategic investments. From 1989 to 2004, our data centers were built to address early computer systems that required controlled temperature environments in which to operate. In 2009, we opened our Chicago data center that spans approximately 10 football fields in size. It is a Generation 3 facility and was our first deployment of modular computing units to dramatically reduce infrastructure costs and the time to deploy large volumes of compute power. We used standard shipping containers to house up to 2,400 servers that were trucked on site and plugged into power, water, and networking infrastructure already in place. This enabled us to scale out capacity to meet customer demands for services within hours versus weeks, and significantly reduced packaging materials, transportation waste, and edge compute nodes host workloads closer to the end users to reduce latency, provide geo-redundancy, and increase overall service resiliency. In 2009, we further developed the containment approach to deliver additional efficiencies in our Dublin Generation 3 facility. This facility spans approximately 7 football fields in size and deploys large-scaled compute capacity contained in the facility. Uses less than 1% of the annual water consumption of a traditional data center. Our Generation 4 facility utilizes air-cooled, IT pre-manufactured components, or IT packs. These state-of-the-art pre-assembled plug-and-play modular components can be manufactured in many locations, and energy is provided from 100% renewable hydropower. Operational excellence and services reliability comprise our highest priorities. Microsoft ensures high availability through advanced monitoring and incident response, service support, and backup failover capability managed through our geographically distributed Microsoft Operations Centers, operating 24/7/365. In addition, our network is one of the largest in the world, with a fiber optic and content distribution network backbone connecting our data centers and edge nodes to ensure high performance and reliability. A large geographically distributed footprint of data centers enables us to be close to customers to reduce network latency and allow for geo-redundant backup and failover. Security at our data centers employs outer and inner perimeters with increasing security at each level, utilizing a combination of technology and traditional physical measures. Technical elements include two-factor access control, badge readers, extensive camera monitoring, and integrated alarm systems. Traditional measures can include perimeter fencing, security officers, and locked server racks. In addition to maintaining best-in-class operations processes, we routinely bring in third parties to verify our capabilities, resulting in ISO and PCI certifications, SAS 70 Type 2 attestations, and FISMA certification and accreditation. Microsoft's award-winning cloud infrastructure powers the cloud services our customers and partners use every day.
Okay, so the basic premise of that video is to say large corporations working on very large data centers with highly skilled, highly paid, highly trained professionals that, you know, test the security, run the systems, and make sure that things are stable. And that's really what you're getting today. Okay, so the benefits of this type of system are cost reduction, but really the biggest thing is simplified management. There's so much less to go wrong than there is in your current internal infrastructure. It's just so much easier to handle. It relieves your IT staff of a lot of pressure and allows them to go on to different projects. There's a substantial amount of risk reduction. We're going to get into risk quite heavily in a bit, so we'll address that for those of you who are thinking, well, what about, you know, people spying, and we'll get into that. And another one is increased agility. Say you have to open a branch office. Say you acquire a new company. Say you open a, you know, another office for your government department. Say you open another public works office. How do you get you know, mail over there? Well, with this type of a system, it's not very difficult. You just pay additional seats and you're on your way. Okay, so benefits: elimination of upfront costs for the capital, basically the capital cost for the server hardware. And you know, I'm sorry to read PowerPoints. I know everybody here can read, but it's one of those technical PowerPoints that you really need to sort of, you know, get through. So the easiest thing I thought was to write it out. Exchange licenses, they're not cheap. All of the seats and all of the server software. Space, heating, cooling, power costs for the servers, it adds up. This is your anti-spam, antivirus on the servers. Again, not cheap. Currently Forefront, not an inexpensive product. Archiving, this is again for larger enterprises and almost all governments. That is very expensive, and you can be just eliminated. Backups, the system that Microsoft and Rackspace and these other companies provide typically include very solid, well, what they include, they don't include backup. They're simply you know, geo-redundant, and they are the data spread over 60. I believe Microsoft's current situation is that they spread your mail over 64 different servers. So you have to have one heck of a failure for that to go. So officially, it's not really backup, but practically speaking, boy, you've got better backup than you have in your office. I'll put money on. Another thing is you got visibility. So say you need to charge back to a given division. Currently, the way you're doing it probably is not very convenient, and that is going to be a problem. With this, you can simply look at it and say, well, it's an extra 100 seats, so we have an extra, you know, $4,000. Let's move on. The substantial savings here are in labor costs. You may not appreciate how much money you're spending with your IT staff on upgrading and patch cycles and fixing problems and running the backups. It just is substantial. It just goes on forever. It's risky and it's expensive. There's also a major reduction in training costs. It pretty much wipes out initial configuration. And again, the agility thing we pointed to earlier, the future expansion, there just isn't any. You just pay additional seats and off you go. Total risk. This is a key word, is total. There's a substantially decreased likelihood of misconfigurations, right? The likelihood of Microsoft screwing this up is way lower than your internal staff, no matter how qualified and skilled they are. Fewer parts to fail. There's a way smaller attack surface for people to come after you with. Microsoft, this was an interesting one. I attended a Gartner event a short while ago, and Gartner was explaining that Microsoft is patching their servers in the 365 hosted Exchange space before they release the patches out to the general public. So basically, you're getting patched and you're going to be more secure than you could possibly be in-house. There's near elimination of patching risk. I hate rebooting an Exchange server. You just never know what's going to happen, and if it dies when you're in the middle of a patch cycle, boy, that's some unpleasantness. During an office outage, this is really minor, but during an office outage, internet users or people that have access to the internet, through their cell phone or through working from home, can still access their mail. There's definitely increased reliability. You may have your system up a lot. Microsoft and Office 3 and Rackspace have it up more, and you can argue the numbers. Sorry, you can't really argue the numbers on that. The data security, again, we're going to get into, and I'll show you a nice little video shortly on how that works. Let's take a look now. This is one of them.
The first thing you have to think about is how to find the data. The physical layer, where we store all of your data, imagine that in the on-premises environment. An on-premises environment, an IT admin or operator knows exactly who's on what disk drive, where that disk drive is, where that computer is. They can walk down the hallway, they can open the door, go and get that drive, take it out, they have the data. Now in the online system, first of all, the only people who have access are the folks that are doing maintenance on the servers. Now they have themselves absolutely no ability to go find out who lives on what partition, what disk, because they're not the administrators in the environment. So let's say that they did want to go pull a drive. Let's speculate. Let's say they went and pulled a drive out of the environment. They go to a server, pull the drive out. As soon as they pull it out, no data available to them, because we have taken techniques like BitLocker to make sure that drive is completely useless as soon as it's pulled out of the environment. Now that's the extreme case. In a regular maintenance case, we are destroying drives as we send them out to a manufacturer. The next thing you should think about is targeting the data. Let's say we move past the physical layer into the logical layer. Let's say that you are able to find yourself an avenue to get on a server where this data lived. Now in this avenue, what we have done is we have made sure that nobody is able to execute any code that is not known to us. So let's say you got onto a server and you opened up that process and you got some piece of code and you put it on our servers. That piece of code won't run, because what we do is we make sure that only known processes are whitelisted such that only those will run. It's not just about the name. We will thumbprint, fingerprint, and of course our job is never done. We ourselves are testing our own boundaries. We have a red team and a blue team, one contracting the other. A red team goes and actively, sneakily, using all the techniques that are open available in the wide internet, try and break into our service regularly. And the blue team tries to stop them. Now, using this kind of rigor and discipline, we make sure that we are testing ourselves continuously. Topmost in our priority list, we are making sure that we are stopping every exploit and filling every hole that we find.
Okay, so agility. Again, this is just the speed at which you can move and how easy it is. And I've alluded to this a number of times. If you grow, you just buy more seats. It doesn't get more expensive, it gets less expensive. Hosted Exchange also gets the new features first. There are some new spam features that are coming out that we will have in the hosted version in the next few weeks that will not be available in the on-premise version for the next, probably the next year. Development efforts are going into hosted and not on-premise. There has been lots of discussion about how many more versions of Exchange there will be that you can buy. Microsoft is believed to be planning is planning one more version, and there's talk of doing a second one past this. But basically, the on-premise Exchange is going to go away shortly, so it's something you should look at. Okay, now this is something you're going to have to figure out for yourself. I'm figuring an IT person is worth about $100K a year on average, and most larger companies have at least one full-time admin or near full-time admin dedicated to Exchange. So easy math, that's 100K. Then if you've got say 8 or 9 servers, which is again larger companies, I appreciate this is for geographically diverse companies that have more. And you want to run a 4-year life cycle on them. When you add up the cost of the servers and the cost of the licensing, it boils down to about 24K per year just in licensing costs. Then there's a whole bunch of other things we're just going to leave just numbers. LYNC, if you have a LYNC server, that would easily go away. Your archiving servers would easily go away, and your backup servers would easily go away. Expenditures. So the annual fees are significant, but not radical. It's about $4 a seat for email. And it's about $4 a seat on top of that for archiving and EDISCOVERY, which again is required for most large companies. Resources like boardrooms and devices, say you have your projectors in there, or again, people booking boardrooms, they're free. So if you have 100 seats at 8, if you're buying both the backup and the core email functionality and the archiving and discovery, it's going to cost you about $10K a year, which is super cheap. Transition costs shouldn't be ignored. There's a lot of planning cost that goes into it. There's some labor cost that goes into it. A little bit of downtime, and there's always user annoyance when you go through transitions. The cell phones and tablets shouldn't need to be reset up, but they might be, and it's just always annoys people when you make any transition. Next. Archiving and e-discovery. Basically, it's compliant with all of the big acronyms, all the alphabet soup. Gartner calls it enterprise class. I do not have great experience with it, but I have some. It's tested in nearly all jurisdictions around the world, so I believe it's standing up quite nicely. Active sync. So it's similar to what you have currently if you're running it in-house. So if you want your phones and other devices to be controlled so they can be wiped out, should you choose them to be, or you want to put password restrictions on, that's easily done through the online version, just like it is through the on-premise. Exchange Online Protection, this is your anti-spam antivirus. Basically, it's exactly the same as you get currently with Exchange Online Protection. It is Exchange Online Protection. However, if you're running Forefront or something equivalent in-house, that can go away, and you can see it's pretty comprehensive here. The one that Microsoft puts on is pretty comprehensive. Next, limitations. Exchange is limited to a massive 50 gig per mailbox, and attachments can be as large as 50 megabytes in size. That limit is far too large and should be reduced, I think, for most people, and it can be. I would default any of my clients to 10 or 15 meg. Email is not a file distribution system and shouldn't be used as such. So just take note of that. But a 50 gig mailbox limit is just absolutely massive, and that's with most of the providers, including Microsoft. And there's no limit if you're using the archiving. If you have 500 gig, well, you've got 500 gig. Limitations. You can set the archiving to be deleted after 1 week, after 1, 3, or 5 years, or to never delete it, just keep it forever. So depending on what your requirements are for your company, how far you want to be able to go back, or specifically how far you don't want to be able to go back, you can set it. Currently, you cannot set a custom time. So if you want it to be 7 years, well, you just can't do that. That clearly is going to change in the near future, but again, I don't think it's an issue for most people. Limitations of LYNC Online. This is not important for most smaller entities, but important for larger entities. So LYNC Online will give you, its biggest feature is that it gives you presence, which tells you whether people are available. And if you think that's not important, after you have it for a few weeks, boy, you really appreciate it. It's kind of like what you thought about email. When you first got email back in the 90s, and you went, yeah, it's kind of nice, and then, yeah, it didn't take very long for you to figure out, boy, that's really a killer app, and you really need to have it. Presence and knowing if people are there, it's very helpful. You can conference in people. You can have more than one person in the conference. You can video to them with your built-in laptop camera, or any additional cameras you have, and the microphones. It's just a really slick system, and of course you can chat. That's normal. It also ties into Skype. However, here's the problem. If you have a conferencing system in your boardroom, like a Tannenberg or Cisco type system, this will not tie into that. Not the end of the earth for most people. A lot of companies are using those systems separately from their LYNC deployments anyway, but just be aware of it. LYNC Online also does not tie into your phone system, into the PBX. It may in the future, but it doesn't now. Other features. PSTs can still be blocked, so if your company has a restriction against having mail stored locally in a PST format, that can still be done without any trouble. It comes with unlimited distribution lists, and users can create them without any trouble. Global footers, so if you have a little sales pitch you want to put on the bottom, a notice about your open house, or your move, or whatever else, you can put that on without any trouble. Here's the fun stuff. Now we're into the risks. So, privacy. This is one that everybody gets freaked out about. If you're storing your mail online, what do you need to be worried about? Well, as it turns out, your mail's probably already pretty darn insecure and should be generally considered public. So, and I think most companies and most executives in particular are aware of this. Lower level staff aren't, but it's the kind of thing you need to train your staff on and say, look, if you're writing it down anywhere, whether it's on Facebook or your email, it's pretty much out there. I'm going to show you a couple of really interesting things to back this up. So, if you are using Exchange Online Protection or any other hosted anti-spam, anti-malware service, your mail's already being looked at and is very subject to snooping. Government intrusions. The vast majority of emails, including internal mail, the internal mail I'll explain in a minute. Basically, mail that travels back and forth across the continents goes through the transatlantic communications cable. I'm going to show you a little video in a minute that shows you how that's hacked. The Snowden papers have shown that, for those of you who are interested in Snowden, that the British intelligence service has a reciprocal arrangement with the NSA to swap data back and forth, so they don't breach each other's country's privacy legislation, but they have the other guy snoop and then report back, so it's really the same thing. So to get back to this transatlantic cable, if you have mail that you are storing, say in Norway or some other country, because you have multiple offices or because you have legal requirements, yeah, that mail is being looked at, and there's really nothing you can do about it. So let's take a very short 2-minute video from April 20th, 2014. This is hacked out of Frontline.
A technician at AT&T, Mark Klein, was one of the first to witness something.
There was some speculation there's some kind of spying they're doing having to do with the new era of fighting terrorism or something, but nobody knew.
One day, an agent of the National Security Agency showed up to talk to one of Klein's supervisors.
I happened to answer the door. He comes in, he's wearing a business suit, looking very stern, not smiling at all. That's all I knew about it, and I thought I'd never hear about this ever again.
But later, inside this AT&T facility, Klein noticed something unusual on the 6th floor.
It's room 641A, says on the door, and what's mysterious about it is there's no door handle. So it looks kind of odd.
Klein began to investigate.
I traced the cabling coming out of the room. I could not find direct cabling going from the secret room to the phone switch. The cabling all seemed to go upstairs.
Upstairs on the 7th floor was where AT&T handled internet traffic.
What Mark Klein found was an infrastructure that suggested that the government was copying all traffic going through the AT&T internet backbone.
Klein got hold of engineering drawings that showed the cables he had traced were going to a device called a splitter.
The splitter is basically a glass prism. So you put a cable in there, The light beam goes in there and it's split like that. One half is going to the secret room, and the other half is going to its normal assigned destination, but it's been copied in the process.
And this was important because if one can split the light or divert the light out of one of those networks, one can copy everyone's traffic on the network. It's kind of unfathomable amount of information.
The internet chops everything up into little data packets. That is your email, your web browsing, photos you might be sending. This is a huge dragnet operation.
Okay, so if you're thinking to yourself, well, I'm small and I don't have an office in Norway or Peru, and this really doesn't apply to me. Still does. Your mail that you're sending out is going out through these systems. AT&T is the backbone for most of the internet, and yeah, your data is being duplicated. Okay, risks. There's a loss of control. When you have hosted exchange, you don't have the granularity that you have on premise. Gartner figures it's about 90 or 95% of the same granularity, but it is a little bit less. However, most people don't want the granularity, don't have a use for the granularity, because the features that you're missing, the details that you're able to delve into on the on-premise exchange are really mostly unnecessary on the exchange, the cloud-based exchange. So what I mean by that is you don't have to calculate or program your edge server. You don't have an edge server. So all of that infrastructure and coding that you go through just goes away. Anyway, in the event of a problem, you have very few options. You can phone Microsoft or Office Rackspace or whoever and ask them to get on it, but it's an issue. Okay, so support. Let's get into that. BPOS is what the predecessor to Office 365 was called, and it's just really a new name. And it was best in about 2012. It's been getting worse, but just lately I've noticed it's been getting better again. So we'll see. It's an issue. It's not terrible. It's just not as good as I would like it to be. Another thing is Microsoft and really all large-scale hosting providers don't understand priorities. So in your on-premise environment, if the system goes down at the time when, let's say, payroll is running a job, accounting's running a job to do with payroll that involves email, boy, your IT staff's really going to snap to it. In Microsoft's case, you're just a number, and you're going to end up with, you'll end up in the queue with everybody else. So the argument against that is, yeah, but you don't have as many problems, so it's less of an issue. You have fewer problems, so you don't have to worry about the priorities as much. Support staff are not as knowledgeable or interested as they used to be. That's just a fact. They just used to be better than they are now inside of Microsoft. You could use other providers like GoDaddy or Rackspace. Rackspace now guarantees 100% uptime. I've talked to them about this extensively. What they're actually saying there is that they just write checks. So if there's a problem, they'll just write you a check. And they define 100% uptime. 100% uptime is 5 minutes down per month. So it's not quite 100%, but close enough. Hacker target. This is the big juicy one. So hosted exchange servers have really got to be a tasty target, as it says here, for hackers. It's not been a problem to date. It's a bit of a surprise. It'll likely be a problem, but you can mitigate that by running Exchange in your hybrid system for the next few years. So the hybrid system basically means you keep one server on premise, but it doesn't do anything other than talk to the cloud. So you move all of your content out. If your on-premise server caught fire, everything would still work. The advantage to keeping one box sitting running inside your company is that you can very, very quickly roll backwards and take the content back inside your company. So if you already own it, and you do, I would just keep that server running. Options. LYNC costs about $1 a month per person. Office 365, and this is again for the large enterprises, will cost, if you total all of this up, the full package is about $20. So this nets out to somewhere around 10, 11, 12 bucks a month, depending on what you negotiate. You also get 5 copies of, now this isn't for us, but for most companies I'm working with, but if you want Office, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, that kind of stuff, what you actually get is 5 copies per person. And that is all controlled by Microsoft. You internally do not have to care if your secretary puts it on their mother's computer or not. It's not an issue. There's quite an elegant little tracking system Microsoft has for this that takes care of all of the management. So don't worry about it. It's very slick. You are not on the hook for anything your staff do with their copies. Voice is something I'm just going to mention here, but really I don't think there's much use. Basically, you can tie in your voicemail and other systems into it. Not of interest for anybody I've worked with so far. Migration process. I am not going to spend time on this other than to say you need to add in a sync server, a proxy server, and a federation server if you want to do the full 365 integration. These are all virtual machines, so there's no hardware cost. It's just it's actually not even licensing it. You just set these up. Not very challenging in theory. In practice, you're probably going to want to bring in a contractor to give you a hand with it. Looks glossy here, but it's more difficult than it looks. You have to create some auto discovery records, and then basically your IT staff inside the company simply right-click on a user and change the database. And they say, yep, I no longer want this person to be stored here on premise. I want them to be stored out in the cloud. You really need to run a pilot. Microsoft will give you up to 90 days. They say 30, but if you ask, they'll get you 90 days of free use for, I think it's 250 people. It's either 50 or 250 if you ask. So just ask. There's no requirement to move to LYNC Online if you don't want to. I would run just simple mail for the cheap $4 a seat for a little while. Let's just go over this and give a quick summary. So the pros are there really is significant money. Microsoft will tell you, and most companies will tell you, the big advantage is the decreased complexity. But if you total up your total cost of ownership of your Exchange infrastructure over, say, a 4-year period, which is one full cycle of server and licensing, for most companies, wow, this saves a lot of money. There's also a net increase in security, and I think I've addressed that by saying, yes, there's a potential for problems in the future, but it's probably substantially less than what you have now, especially if you're a government, especially if you're small, where you don't have the resources to manage your security properly. And this is a good test for other cloud services. So say you're looking at CRM or NAV or other type Dynamics products from Microsoft, and you don't want to run them in-house. This is a great little test for it. Microsoft's very good, and so is Rackspace, very good at running the mail, and this gets you, it's a thin edge of the wedge, gets you in and gets you comfortable with it. The cons, you reduce control. There's always some disruption when you make a change, any change at all. The questionable tech support's there, and you might have notable security issues in the future, but I think it's okay. And I think what you need to do is go have a chat. Lots and lots of discussion. Talk to Microsoft, talk to Rackspace, talk to your IT staff. You may be laying off some IT staff, so you might have to deal with that delicately. But because of the expansion of IT in most places, your IT staff probably won't get laid off, they'll just get reassigned, and you'll delay hiring other people. So I think that's that. If you have any questions or concerns, please contact Ian Matthews at Up and Running. That's URTECH, as in URTech, .ca. So www.urtech.ca, and all our contact information is up there, and it's been a pleasure. Thank you. Have a great day. Bye-bye.